Welcome to a new episode of the Sacco Voice. My name is Elias Osodo. With me today is Mr. Peter Mufoyongo. Peter, welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, my name, as you've heard, is Peter Mufoyongo. Peter Mufoyongo is a tax consultant practicing in Nakuru. Prior to this, I was an employee of Kenya Revenue Authority, and I worked for that organization for close to 35 years, from 1988 to 2022, when I retired as a manager.
Thank you so much, Peter. We are going straight to a few questions I'm going to ask you about taxation in relation to SACCOs. How are SACCOs registered for domestic tax purposes?
To begin with, SACCOs is a taxpayer by virtue of being a corporate body, and in tax language it is called a taxable person. So for a SACCO to register for tax purposes, especially for domestic tax purposes, there are 4 ways of registering. The first one is through the KRA platform known as iTax. So a SACCO can do what is called self-registration and register for the following taxes. We have income tax, pay as one, VAT, and because of its core business of dealing with the transfer of money, they are also required to register for excise.
What are the main non-compliance issues in registration and applicable penalties?
Now, if a SACCO does not register, of course registration is guided by the Tax Procedures Act 2015, and of course being a legislation, we also have offences and penalties. So to begin with, failure to register is an offence. Failure not to register is also an offence. Yes, and it attracts penalties, which would range between 10,000 and 100,000.
What are the types of returns that SACCOs file?
SACCOs would ordinarily file 3 types of returns, and these returns would show either a payment. If it's not a payment, it would show a loss or a credit in the case of VAT. So it's either a payment return or a loss return.
What are the statutory records that are required to be kept in support of the returns filed?
It will depend on the tax head. For income tax, taxpayers, SACCOs included as well, they're expected to keep books of accounts, that is the ledgers, the cash book, the journals, and of course they're also expected to keep the supporting source documents. We're talking about vouchers, expenses vouchers, contracts, deeds. So all those source documents that may be used in coming up with the books of accounts, they are expected to keep all those. For VAT, again, they are required to keep source documents, and for purchases, they are expected to keep ETR invoices. Currently, we are having the teams, so they have to be registered for teams, and they have e-teams invoices. They are also expected to have the machines, the ETR machines, currently known as the teams machines, to generate those invoices. They're also expected to keep a record of their stocks, daily stock records, in addition to a ledger account known as a VAT control account. For excise tax head, there are a good number of records that are required, and they are normally specified in the excise regulations. Of course, we have the stock records, we have the purchase, just similar to these others that are kept in these other taxes, income tax as well as VAT. But for excise, as far as it affects SACCOs, because most of the SACCOs are in money transfer business, they're actually expected to keep the ledger, the excise ledger, excise control ledger, for excise purposes, because they're charging they are having charges of the money transfers. So they are expected to keep the ledgers. For payers one tax head, SACCOs are expected to keep tax deduction cards, commonly known as P9s. They are expected to also maintain payrolls or master rolls. In addition to that, you also have some expenses incurred on behalf of employees, like staff welfare. They are also supposed to keep all expenses relating to staff. So all those records are required to be kept for the SACCO to file their pay as one return.
Peter, what are the major challenges in filing SACCO returns in iTax?
Each of those taxes have got unique challenges in filing. If you take the example of pay as one, SACCOs will always find challenges in computing receipts to be brought to charge. What employees receive that are taxable, they normally have challenges. That is as far as normal employees are concerned. We also have challenges when trying to establish the benefits relating to directors. Car benefits, computation of car benefits is also another challenge. We also have a special category of employees, disabled employees. They normally enjoy some benefits which most of the SACCOs are not aware of. They normally treat disabled employees as any other employee, but they have some privileges which they enjoy for tax purposes. SACCOs also have challenges in computing salary arrears, computation of tax on lump sum payments like gratuity or timing of benefits. They also have challenges in computing fringe benefit tax. So there are several challenges in trying to establish benefits from employment as far as employees are concerned. Also, SACCOs do have challenges in establishing other levies that are being administered by KRA under the pay as one tax head. We have levies such as the housing levy. There are challenges in arriving at the figures for levies. We also have NHIF payments, NSSF payments, as well as the National Industrial Training Agency levies. So SACCOs would always normally have challenges in computing balances relating to those charges. As far as VAT tax head is concerned, the major challenge is actually the filing of the return. The return requires a lot of details about the recipient of the services. So it requires SACCOs to keep very accurate records, some form of registers on all their VAT transactions, because here what is required is a record of each and every transaction that is being carried out that attracts VAT.
How does KRA monitor SACCO filing and payments?
There are several methods that the KRA uses in monitoring filing and payments. The most important one is due dates. KRA is very keen on due dates. The time or the date when taxpayers or SACCOs are supposed to, do their filing and pay. When it comes to income tax returns, SACCOs are expected to file their returns before the expiry of 6 months after the end of the accounting period. For example, if the accounting period ends on 31st December, then they are expected to file their return by 30th June of the following, after the end of the accounting period. For withholding taxes, of course, SACCOs are expected to withhold some taxes on particular payments. And the due date for most of the withholding taxes used to be by the 20th of the following month, but we have had amendments to the legislation whereby they are expected to pay what has been deducted before the expiry of 5 working days. So for withholding taxes, it's almost immediate. After deducting, you are expected to pay before the expiry of 5 working days. For pay as one, it is normally the 9th of the following month, you file and pay. Excise and VAT, the two taxes, the timeline when they are supposed to file is 20th of the following month. So it is filing and paying. So one way of monitoring the filing of the returns is by monitoring due dates. KRA is very, very particular about on due dates. So come 9th and you have not filed, then they start monitoring you. The second aspect is KRA does what is called a trend analysis of your filing and payments. And from that trend analysis, they can be able to pick up underpayments. They can be able to pick up non-payments of the taxes. You file, the Sacco can file and not pay. You remember I mentioned that SACCOs can have a payment return. So they can file in a payment return, but they don't pay. So that will be picked from their trend analysis. The KRA will also pick a trend that shows some declining. So if there is a decline, again, the Sacco will be picked. You also have credit or loss filing that will also be picked, as well as late payment, because each of those taxes have got that date by which they are supposed to file and pay. So some of them will pay after the due date. That is called late payment. So trend analysis is a method that is used in monitoring payment of, filing of Sacco returns. So for trend analysis, when trends such as underpayments, declining, or non-filing is picked up by KRA, then they make inquiries to find out whether there has been a decline, why the taxpayer is not filing, and why there is that declining trend. So KRA will endeavor to find out the reasons why there has been that trend has been shown, whether it is declining, a loss, and then take appropriate actions. The third method the KRA uses in monitoring, filing, and payment is conducting what is called risk-based compliance interventions. In this regard, KRA will endeavor to review the returns, that is, testing the accuracy of those returns. Normally, what SACCOs would file are called self-assessments returns, but KRA will intervene by conducting what is called returns review, look at the items in the return, and maybe test the accuracy of those entries. So that is, of course, based on identified risks. Also, KRA will be keen when there's that trend where we have a decline. They'll also want to interrogate the reason for the decline, and the taxpayers will always do what is called an amended return. So when the amendment of that return is showing a downward trend, KRA will come in as an intervention and try to establish whether that decline is can be supported. And so they'll go ahead and ask for documents in support of the taxpayer's amendment. So those are the three ways of where KRA intervenes in filing and payments.
How does KRA enforce accurate reporting in SACCOs?
KRA, to enforce accurate reporting, they've got another intervention. In fact, there are two. The first one is in-depth audits. And in these in-depth audits, KRA will review the SACCO's return and identify some risks. So there is a tool that is used to identify the SACCO to be audited. That tool is called risk profiling, and it is used to select cases to be audited, and the tax heads to be audited will depend on the risks identified. So there is also this intervention that is in-depth audit, whereby there is a selection of that SACCO, and it is not an audit of what everything that is in that return, but they pick the item that they consider risky and examine the same item. So there are three types of audits that are normally carried out by KRA. The first one is the desk audit, whereby the SACCO will be required to submit selected records to the KRA offices. The second kind of audit is the field audit, where KRA officers will come to the SACCO and examine the records from the SACCO offices. These audits will either be comprehensive, they might cover the 3 or 4 taxes or all the taxes that the SACCO has registered, or they might just pick a single issue and do an audit of the same. Now that one could be followed by another method. This one is a bit, there has to be something that triggers what is called an investigation. When KRA conducts an investigation on a SACCO, it means they have information that the SACCO is involved in fraud. So investigation would actually border on criminality, that there is fraud involved. So that is the third method under which KRA will intervene in examining those returns.
Thank you, Peter. What are the outcomes of KRA interventions?
The first outcome is that KRA can intervene through that compliance check or that audit or investigation and come up with no adjustment. That is one outcome. The second outcome is that after the examination, KRA might come up with some adjustments to be made. In this case, they'll issue what is called an additional assessment. Okay. The first one, when there's no adjustment that has been made, it means that the taxpayer's self-assessment has been accepted the way it is with no adjustment. So that's a self-assessment. Then we also have a default or estimated assessment. This is where the SACCO has failed to file a return. You remember there was that intervention where there was monitoring of the returns, and non-filing was picked up under the trend. So when a non-filing is picked up, then the SACCO is asked to file the return. If the SACCO fails to file that return, then an assessment is issued, and that assessment is the one that is referred to as an estimated or a default assessment, where the SACCO has failed to file a return. So those are the three outcomes of KRA intervention.
All right. How are disputes involving assessments resolved?
A dispute will arise when the taxpayer does not agree with the adjustments made by KRA. Now, when the taxpayer is not in agreement with the adjustment that are made by KRA, there are two options. But there is a procedure that must be followed. First of all, he must object. And this objection has to be filed in before the expiry of 30 days. You lodge in an objection, and then that objection, you state the clear grounds of the objection, give the supporting documentation. The Commission will examine your reason for objecting, plus the documentation that I've given up, and can come up with the three outcomes. We can have an amended assessment per the return that we had filed on. The second outcome is that you can have amendments to the return, and you have agreed with those amendments, in which case we shall have an agreed amended assessment. The third scenario is where you are not able to support your objection, and this will result to that assessment being confirmed. So we have three scenarios there. You can have the assessment being amended per the return you filed, or alternatively, you can have an amended assessment with adjustments which you have agreed on, or alternatively, you may not be able to support your objection, in which case the Commission will have no alternative but to confirm the assessment.
Thank you. What are the main non-compliance issues in return processing?
Even before we go there, we have another process. Of course, at the objection level, when probably the Commissioner has confirmed the assessment, the Sacco as a taxpayer might not be satisfied with that decision. So there is another avenue for the Sacco to dispute. And this is done through an appeal process. The Sacco can appeal to the tax appeal. Even in the taxation, there is a tribunal called the Tax Appeal Tribunal. Then the case is referred to an ADR. An ADR means alternative dispute resolution, where the taxpayer and the KRA are given the opportunity to see whether they can resolve out of court. And if they are able to resolve the dispute out of court, they take it back, they fight it back to the TAT for endorsement. Again, if the taxpayer is not satisfied with the decision of the TAT, he can still appeal to the High Court. If the High Court is not satisfied with the decision of the High Court, he can go all the way to the Court of Appeal, which then is final. So disputes are resolved all the way from objection to the Court of Appeal.
What are the main non-compliance issues in returns processing?
In return processing, of course, taxpayers are expected to file the return by due date, which therefore means that if they fail to file the return on time, an offense has been committed. So that is the first offense that a taxpayer can commit: failure to file a return. Another offense is actually filing the return but filing it late, out of time. That's an offense. We also have other offenses relating to the return itself. You recall that the Commissioner has got powers to interrogate the returns, and he does that by giving notices. So the Commissioner will give you a notice to submit returns. If you fail to comply with that notice, that is an offense. That is an offense for failure to avail the records that have been requested by the Commissioner. The Commissioner might also require you to attend an interview in the office. If you fail to attend that interview, that is yet another offense. So there are very many offenses as far as return filing is concerned. We have filing itself, filing late, failure to avail records requested by the Commissioner, failure to attend the interview when called by the Commissioner. All these constitute offenses, and of course we have penalties for the same. The penalties normally range from 10,000, and where you heard me mention about fraud, it goes all the way to 10 million. And all these offenses and penalties are specified in the Tax Procedures Act 2015.
Peter, what are the main sources of debt in respect of SACCOs?
Now, there are several sources of debt arising from either self-assessment or interventions by KRA. We have value-added tax arrears in case the Sacco is registered for VAT. We can also have assessment arrears for income tax. When payment is made late, interest accrues. That one is also another source. When offenses have been committed by the Sacco, of course we have penalties. So all those constitute sources of debt that can arise from Sacco activities. And these debt are divided into various categories. We have self-assessment. We can also have estimated assessment. So these are taxes that are arising out of what the taxpayer has filed, depending on the tax head that the Sacco is registered. The Sacco can also pay other forms of taxes under various tax heads. For example, if a SACCO has commercial vehicles, it will be expected to pay advance tax on the commercial vehicles that they have. If a SACCO advances low interest loans to its employees, they'll be expected to pay what is called fringe benefit tax. The SACCO normally pays dividends to members. They are expected to deduct withholding tax and pay after declaring the dividend. We also have some SACCOs that have been appointed by KRA as withholding tax agent, either to withhold rent if they are big tenants, or they withhold rent if they are also incurring a lot of expenses on vertible goods and services. So SACCOs can also be appointed as withholding tax agents, in which case they are expected to pay withholding rent as well as withholding VAT. Of course, I've mentioned interest as well as penalties. SACCOs are also expected to pay excise duty on charges on money transfers. Excise is also expected from SACCOs, that is domestic excise. So these revenues are coming either from estimated assessment, self-assessment, or additional assessments. There are several tools that are used in collecting SACCO debt. But to begin with, I must clarify what debt means. If a SACCO has filed its return and paid, there's no debt there. If a SACCO pays after the due date, that balance becomes debt, and the KRA has got various tools that they use in collecting the debt. And before that debt is collected, KRA normally analyzes the debt, what is commonly known as aged analysis. So we have a debt that is relatively new, between 30 to 60 days. When the debt is between 30 to 60 days, the tool that KRA uses is writing demand notices. They'll start with a 14-day demand notice, asking you to make payment of the balance that you have not paid after the due date. Then if you don't respond to the 14-day notice, they'll give you another notice, a reminder. It is called a 7-day notice. Again, if you fail to comply, they are still going to be lenient. They'll give you a final reminder called the final demand notice. Once you get the final demand notice, it means they have exhausted what they need to apply in securing payment of that debt. So if a SACCO fails in complying with the 3 notices, then KRA has no other alternative but to enforce it by engaging other stakeholders that owe the SACCO funds or money. And this is by way of what is commonly known as agency notices. So by that time, the debt will have grown old from new to debt. From new to old, and that is when KRA now uses the second tool known as the agency notice. This is a notice that is sent to taxpayers who owe money to the SACCO, instructing them to remit what is owing to KRA by the SACCO. So these are the 2 tools that the KRA uses in collecting debt from SACCOs. However, when SACCOs are in really financial liquidity maybe difficulty, they can approach KRA and then negotiate for a payment plan. KRA is also open to a payment plan. There's quite understanding that sometimes Sacco can have cash flow problems. So a payment plan can be negotiated with KRA. You agree on the installments that the Sacco can be able to pay over a period of time. Normally the installments within a local tax office is normally 6 installments, 6 months. And if the Sacco is not able to order the payment plan, they can apply to have an extension covering up to 12 months. So that is another tool. If the Sacco is not in a sound financial position, they can apply for a payment plan. So a payment plan is also another tool that KRA uses in collecting debt from Saccos.
So Peter, if you could briefly explain to us what is the frequency of submission of aging list to the Saccos to make them aware of the outstanding arrears of tax payable?
Okay. First of all, in their trend, they'll discover that you have not paid within the statutory date. If it is pay as one, you have not paid by 10th or 9th. If it is VAT, you have not paid by 20th. So immediately the officer or the account manager will start the process of, demanding the debt. And this starts by way of maybe you can receive a telephone call from the tax office reminding you that you have not paid and therefore make arrangements to pay. Then after that, they'll now give you the 14-day notice. So ordinarily when a debt becomes due, there's always a reminder, either by phone, to be followed by notices.
All right.
And if the Sacco is not able to, then the Sacco is open to go to KRA and negotiate for a payment plan. But sometimes the debt can become hardcore. It can become hardcore, so difficult for the Sacco to pay. Then the KRA will have no alternative but maybe to come for the assets of the Sacco. The Sacco, that is normally not. Is a measure of last resort. But ordinarily they normally try negotiating with the Sacco or the taxpayer and understanding the position of the Sacco, and that is why they encourage more of payment plans before they resort to the district of the Sacco's assets.
Peter, thank you so much. We have come to the end of our show today. I may wish to request you to give up your parting words to the viewers who are in the Sacco fraternity.
My word to Saccos is I would like to encourage you to be compliant with the revenue laws. As a Sacco, it is your responsibility to pay taxes in accordance with the law. I would emphasize that if you are not registered for tax obligations, kindly visit KRA offices to be guided on registration. And once you are registered, ensure that you do your filing within the timelines. Other than filings, you also pay within the timelines to avoid penalties, which attract penalties, some of them very, very punitive, especially where fraud is involved. And when it comes to collection, in case you are having difficulties in making payment of the taxes that you have either self-assessed yourself or you have agreed as payable, you can approach KRA for a payment plan to ensure that the smooth running of your Sacco is not interrupted. Thank you.
That was an insightful interaction with Peter. I believe we have learned a lot from him. Stay tuned for the next episode. This is Elias Osodo.